Alberto Giacometti was born on the 10th of October 1901 in the Swiss mountain village of Borgonovo, near Stampa in Val Bregaglia, in the canton of Graubünden. His father was the well-known post-impressionist painter Giovanni Giacometti. His mother, Annetta Giacometti Stampa, came from one of the valley's established families. From 1915 to 1919, Giacometti was pupil at a boarding school in Shears, where a small studio was set up for him. During 1918, both there and at home, he produced his first masterful drawings. In the autumn of 1919, he began studying art in Geneva, attending the École des Beaux-Arts and the École des Arts Industriels, but dropped out in 1920. In the spring of 1920, his father took him to the Venice Biennale, where Giacometti was profoundly impressed by the works of Jacopo Tintoretto and Giotto. That autumn he set off for Florence, where he was particularly fascinated by an Egyptian head in the Archaeological Museum. It is, as he later wrote, the first sculpture he had seen that appears lifelike. Giacometti travelled on to Rome, where he stayed until the summer of 1921, living with relatives and pursuing his studies. In the autumn of 1921, he accompanied an older Dutch archivist to the Tyrolean Alps and witnessed his sudden death, a traumatic event from which Giacometti never entirely recovers. In January 1922, Giacometti arrived in Paris. He enrolls in the life drawing and sculpture classes of Antoine Bourdelle at the Académie de la Grande Chaumière. In summer, he spends extended periods in Stampa and Maloja, where he will frequently return throughout his life. In Paris, Giacometti discovered Surrealism. He became friends with André Breton and joined the Surrealist movement in 1931. Inspired by Surrealism, Giacometti stopped modelling from life and focused on dreamlike visions. He claimed that he only realised sculptures that presented themselves to him in a finished state, which fit perfectly with the tenets of Surrealism. In 1934, Giacometti was working on the piece Hands Holding the Void. His attempt was to depict a complete figure of a woman, 1.5 meters high, but found himself facing a creative impasse. The sculpture was a turning point for Giacometti. Not satisfied with the legs, torso and breasts, the artist decided he would need to try working from nature, so he hired a model, and, in doing so, he disappointed Breton, who was absolutely against this approach to creating art. When Giacometti accepted a commission in 1934, This was the final straw for the Surrealists, who felt he was tying himself to the bourgeoisie, and so they expelled him from the group. We move forward to 1945, and Giacometti has just returned from Switzerland to Paris after the war's end. It was in Paris that Giacometti had a vision. One day he was coming out of the cinema on the Boulevard Montparnasse when he suddenly experienced a complete transformation of reality. He understood that his vision of the world had been photographic up until that moment, though reality was actually poles apart from the supposed objectivity of a film. With this, Giacometti felt that he was entering the world for the first time, observing the many heads around him as though isolated from space. His most famous sculptures emerged from this period. Nothing was like I imagined it to be. A head became an object completely unknown and without dimensions. In the final years of his life, Giacometti focused more on painting, producing many figurative paintings alongside his sculptures. He was attempting to capture and render the vibration of life from his models. His portraits increasingly evolved as the outcome of an ongoing dialogue between painting and sculpture. Giacometti's favorite models were the people closest to him, such as his brother and assistant Diego, his wife Annette, or his friend Isabel. Occasionally he painted models he didn't know well, as long as they agreed to pose for him for hours on end, in challenging conditions. After working all day in his studio, Giacometti haunted the bars of Montparnasse. Here he became acquainted with the young women who plied their trade in those sleazy dens of debauchery. The alluring ladies of the night respectfully referred to him as Monsieur Albert. One evening while drinking at Chez Adrienne, he was immediately attracted to the youngest, who called herself Caroline. She differed from the others with a certain natural brilliance and a disarming casualness. She smokes menthol cigarettes, drinks Coca-Cola, is not shy, and inevitably men fall under her charm. Caroline had been drawn to Paris to escape the misery of the provinces. Giacometti did not care that she sold her body, or even that she stole, instead spending more money to get her out of prison. Caroline helped the artist relive his youth, taking him through the streets of nocturnal Paris, and stirring within him long-forgotten memories. He went back night after night, looking for her, and she eventually for him. He wanted her to model, and Caroline was more than happy to escape her squalid surroundings. She poses for him in his workshop at the end of the cul-de-sac at 46 Rue Hippolyte Mandron. Little did they both know that she would become his last lover and greatest muse. Giacometti worked tirelessly on paintings and sculptures of his wife Annette and his model and muse Caroline, with Annette modelling during the day and Caroline the evening hours. Caroline was her pseudonym. Her real name was Yvonne Poradieu. 1960 was when she started to sit for him, and continued sitting regularly until the artist's death. Giacometti painted at least 30 portraits of Caroline and made a bust of her in 1961. She is said to have stubbed a cigarette out on an oil portrait of herself, while Giacometti was still painting it. Many of the paintings and drawings from Giacometti's final years depict Caroline, with whom, as all his biographers and researchers agree, he was plainly obsessed. His wife Annette is said to have been enraged by the relationship, even though the couple had more or less an open marriage. Some Giacometti researchers have suggested that this was because Caroline supplanted Annette as Giacometti's primary model and muse. But one of those researchers has said that his wife's letters offer a simpler explanation. It was because Alberto was in love with Caroline, and she was overwhelmed by jealousy. From 1961 to 1965, Caroline visited Giacometti almost every day in his studio. An amour fou, whose bonds became increasingly closer despite the resistance of Annette and his brother Diego. The much older lover provided Caroline with money and an occasional escape from her demi-monde friends. He takes her to the Louvre, which the girl from a peasant background visits for the first time, and on trips, including to London. Through him she is introduced to art and many prominent artists. He is not fooled by anything and doesn't care about money. He is already immensely famous and rich. She asks him for a red Ferrari, having no real concept of money. Instead, he gives her a convertible MG of the same colour. Caroline is not a saint. That's what he likes about her. This wildness, this abandon, and this fury that her youth exudes. He will soon be ill for the last time. When Giacometti, riddled with cancer, lies dying in a clinic in Chur, Switzerland, It is Caroline whom he calls to be with him in his last hour, and it was she standing quietly at his funeral, behind his wife, relatives and colleagues. What did he leave her? A single crumpled piece of paper, a handwritten greeting from the great Giacometti. Not a painting, not a sketch, not even one of her portraits, and there is no publicity at the time. She would have been forgotten if the diligent reporter and author Frank Maubert hadn't tracked Caroline down where she was living her final years in Nice on the French Riviera. She was found 45 years later, impoverished and in poor health. She spends her days in a sparsely furnished tiny two-room apartment in Nice. If she leans over the railing of her balcony, she can catch a glimpse of a small section of the Promenade des Anglais. She has thin lips, with sloppily applied lipstick. When she breathes, a slight whistle escapes. She does not have a defined appearance. Her face is of a woman who has lived a full life, with a slightly lost and tired air. But her gaze retains a fiery intensity, in which one can see her youthful character. Her apartment consists of 2 rooms minimally furnished. There is a certain disarray, to which she excuses herself, saying her health has worsened. There are ashtrays full of cigarette butts and pill boxes scattered around. There is a hallway that also combines as a kitchen, a small bedroom, and, on a table next to the bed, a black and white photograph of Alberto. The photograph is damaged. She picks it up and holds it tightly, and says wistfully, "Isn't my Alberto so handsome?" She remembers the hospital room where her love lay dying. "The grief overwhelmed me and I tried to contain it. He tried to smile at me and he managed to speak. 'Death is about to take me away. How I worked so hard for nothing at all.' She whispers. Tears ran down my cheeks. She seems to reminisce about the keenest of her memories, her face alive with old hurts and pleasures. Yes, I wanted Alberto's child. Alas, Alberto could not. We tried. I even sent him to consult specialists. Nothing could help." She still exudes a remnant of the charm that no doubt captivated Giacometti, a charm paired with sadness. However, the irrepressible love of life and the will for freedom with which she kept her lover in suspense seems to have disappeared. The story of a love that only brings back faded memories. What part does she feel she played in Giacometti's art? "I am not an artist or an art historian," she wrote, but I know that in a modest way I participated in the work. I was a bit like the paint or plaster, living matter, that which allowed him to create. In any case, for Caroline, this was certain. We loved each other with mad love. He electrified me. I loved him madly, as he loved me madly. He kept telling me that I was his goddess, that I was his excess. Examining their love affair through the passage of words, we can't help but feel a nostalgic longing to be able to go there, share a table with Alberto and Caroline, drink a coffee or a glass of champagne at Chez Adrienne, and then, around 4 a.m, for oysters and a plate of fries at Chez Dupont, near Montparnasse Station, to really experience those places, before they became ghosts that only exist in yellowing books and old photos. Well, my friends, I do hope you enjoyed that presentation. So what did you think about Giacometti and his final love affair? The source that I found that said his wife was furious and very distraught about the affair, I could imagine to be true, even though the other source I found said that they had an open marriage. Any woman who is in love with her husband, when she finds out he's being intimate with another woman who is much younger, I mean, the natural reaction is to be fury. I can't imagine that she would be happy about the situation, but I guess there are some women who are of a different mindset altogether, because this photo here suggests that everything was harmonious. There she is smiling at Giacometti and Caroline. She seems to be really outside of these two, doesn't she? She doesn't seem to be intimate. They seem to be side by side and close. So I don't know how she felt about this. But any normal woman who was in love with their husband wouldn't like that. I guess he was trying to recapture his youth. That's the only thing it can be at that age, with a much younger woman. And of course, if he wasn't famous or rich, she wouldn't have given him a second glance. That's the truth of the matter. A lot of these rich men try to fool themselves and think that somehow these women are attracted to them, when that's obviously not the case. I would like to know your thoughts on that. Maybe his wife was hurt, but just decided to keep the peace and say nothing, from fear of him ending the relationship altogether. We'll never know. I think it rather insulting to his wife to do that, but I have read that he was not the easiest of characters, and so it's no surprise that he would show such dysfunctional tendencies. I would love to know your thoughts on that. I must say I prefer Giacometti's pre-war works. I like the colour style. A lot of the Swiss painters at that time were painting in a similar manner. I prefer that myself. Paintings for me should be beautiful. They should be harmonious. They should speak to your soul and brighten your thoughts. They should elevate your thoughts. It really should be something very pleasant to look at. That is my opinion, of course. So I prefer, we've lost that one, I prefer these works. I love the colours. Beautiful. Just really nice. But of course, these are the ones that he is famous for. I guess it's like the emperor's new clothes. If you dare to speak out and say the opposite, you're classed as an ignoramus and you're not artistically enlightened and all that rubbish. But it's like I'm the boy in the crowd who says, well, the emperor hasn't got any clothes on. It's a load of BS. I mean, they're quite nightmarish, aren't they, these ones? And his stick figures don't do anything for me either. Nothing against the man himself. He lived an artistic life right to the end. I love that. I love the fact that he stayed in his little studio. Even though he had so much money, he didn't really care about that. He lived for the art. Good on him. Absolutely brilliant. But I would like to know what you think of his art. Is that something that you would hang on your wall, not knowing, if you didn't know that person was famous, would you buy, for example, the work we are looking at now? Would you hang that in your living room? I wouldn't, personally, but everyone else has different tastes. I found a few interesting things we can look at now. So I found this. I read this a few years back, and so I found it again. This is from artnews.com. A little time capsule. Giacometti Institute opens in Paris with reconstruction of artist's studio. Love it. And I love the fact that he just stayed there in this place. People who actually went there described it as a dump that was crumbling and falling apart, but he loved it. The fact that he actually lived there too, I think that's fantastic. And that his wife, Annette, even though the studio went back to the owner after Giacometti's death, she collected everything, including the stuff that he had painted on the walls, all of his equipment, all of his paintbrushes, everything she got together so that it could be reconstructed at a later date. So very good that she kept that for posterity. I will leave the link for this. You can read this story. I'd love to go and see that, actually. I would like to see the reconstruction of his studio. Even better, I would like to go back in time and actually go and see his studio. So I will leave that. Found another thing that I also read a couple of years back. It was this guy. He found this rare Giacometti chandelier bought for £250 in London. It's set to sell for millions. This is from theguardian.com. This was probably from a few years ago. Can you see a date there? 2023. No, I've read it previous to this. So he did find it some time ago, this guy, but it must be just up for sale now. Yeah, so he saw this, he recognized it. Obviously the London antique shop didn't know who it was by. I bet they were furious afterwards. But mind you, it was back in the, I think it was back in the 60s or 70s when he found it in the antique shop, but he kept it all these decades. Lucky for him, but he kept it all his life, this guy. After he bought it from the antique shop, it was in his collection. Look at the price now. They reckon the last chandelier went for a top price of £7.6 million. Wow. Incredible. Imagine finding something like that in a junk store. He hung it up in his home in Hampstead, North London, for 50 years, content to reflect on the piece's extraordinary place in cultural history. Well done, Mr. Craxton. So it was originally bought or commissioned from this guy, Watson, I guess. He commissioned the work from Giacometti. If I'm reading this correct, I'm probably missing stuff. It's always like that for me when I'm quickly reading through something again. But anyway, I'd love to find something like that. Wouldn't you? Isn't that amazing? I do like some of his chandeliers, I must say. But I would most definitely sell it. I would most definitely sell it if I found one. Yeah, that would set you up for life. And well done to that investigative journalist/author for tracking Caroline down in Nice, or Yvonne as her real name was. Well done. She had basically been forgotten about. and such an important muse for Giacometti. I would love to, find some famous ex-film star who's been forgotten about, or a model for a famous artist, like that guy that tracked down Louise Brooks. She was living in some tenement block there, poor, and he tracked her down, and basically she got a cult following again because of that. I would love to do something like that. I'll never find anyone. I wouldn't know where to look. But isn't it a shame that Giacometti didn't give her a painting or a sculpture? Something. She could have lived for the rest of her life in comfort if she had used the money wisely. Why didn't he give her one of the portraits that he did of her? I don't really understand that. I guess, if you're on your deathbed, you've got other things on your mind. But couldn't he have just quickly said in front of a nurse, I want her to have a painting, or write it on a piece of paper? That's a shame, I think. I wonder what she thought about that. That's a bit sad. I think it must have been quite a surprise for her when this reporter contacted her. I guess she never thought that day would happen, but I'm glad it did before she died. She is dead now, by the way. I'm happy that he found her so she could tell her side of the story. The guy, the author, I think I mentioned his name earlier in the presentation. He has written a book about his visit. I will put that up on the screen now so you can check it out if you want to buy it. Well, my dears, I think that's about it for today. Can't think of anything else. Oh, yeah, we've got a blooper. I've got a blooper coming up. I hope you enjoy that. All right, my dears, take care. God bless, and goodbye. She is said to have stubbed a cigarette out on an oil portrait of herself, while Giacometti no, well, it's not nice. While Giacometti was still painting it, I guess Caroline wasn't too enamored of his style either. That wasn't really a blooper. It just made me laugh, actually, to think she had a look at the finished product, and cigarette stubbed out was the verdict. So after I had ended the video, I was thinking myself, do I have anything for the show and tell? Have I got anything connected remotely to Giacometti? And then I remembered something in the gently sloping junk pile that I hadn't seen in years. And this is it. You may be thinking to yourself, what is the connection? Well, I'm just about to tell you, because this work, I believe, is from a lady called Sophie Taeuber Arp. She was married to Hans Arp, or he's more commonly known as Jean Arp, and he was a member of the Surrealist movement with André Breton, which Giacometti was a member of, so I'm sure that they met each other at least once, possibly more. It's quite possibly they went out to dinner together and had discussions together about art, etc. So this is a very small work. It's only about the size, including the dimensions of the frame, about the size of a small chocolate box, and it features a child's artist palette. And I say a child's artist palette because it's tiny. It's actually smaller than a cigarette box. It's tiny. Yeah, I was very lucky to find this, and the only clues that it is her is the paper on the side that says Taeuber, and this appears to be her initials. They also share something else in common, which I'm just about to show you. But it's a wonderful piece, isn't it? It's quite cute. I love small art objects. I'm quite, because I don't have that much space. The smaller they are, the more that I can fit into my abode. So let's go and have a look what else Giacometti and Sophie Taeuber Arp have in common. So this is what they have in common. Here we have on the left Giacometti on the 100 Swiss franc note. These were taken out of circulation a few years back. These are the old notes. But there we have Giacometti, Alberto Giacometti with the 100 franc note. And there we have Sophie Taeuber Arp on the 50 franc note. So they're right side by side, two very important Swiss artists. What is tragic about Sophie is that I'm going to cut right through to her death, which was quite tragic. Where is it here? In early 1943, Taeuber Arp missed the last tram home one night and slept in a snow-covered summer house. She died there of accidental carbon monoxide poisoning caused by an incorrectly operated stove at the house of Max Bill. So she obviously just found that was the house. I'm guessing that she knew Max Bill, doesn't say, and decided to stay there. I'm guessing he was not there. and died tragically at the age of 54. Wow. That is, you never know when you're going to go, do you? My goodness. Don't stay in any summer houses in Switzerland. No, I think it's changed now. Everyone's got solar paneling. So she was married to Jean Arp. There we go. So that was the connection to Giacometti in my show and tell. Thank you for watching. I'm definitely off now. Bye-bye.